Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. My name is Nick Shizis, and I'm a faculty member of the psychology department. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. Welcome to our 18th annual mental health program. Today's focus will be neurodiversity. We would like to start our program by thanking my co-organizer, Dr. Amy Williamson. I saw Amy. Thank you very much. Amy helped us with every detail of this program, so 1,000 thank yous to her. Also, thank you to Dr. Cindy Anderson. I saw Dr. Anderson here. Hey, Cindy. Hey, no, thank you, Dr. Franzek. No, thank you guys for being here, and for the Liberal Arts Department for the support in bringing this program to campus this year and every year. And also, thank you to the entire psychology department for all of their ideas and their support in making this a successful program, and for helping with the topic and to structure some of the questions that we have for our panelists today. Also, a huge thank you and big gratefulness to the Psychology Club students who are going to help usher some of our audience members to their seats. And finally, we thank the panelists and all the audience members, too, for being here. We can't host these programs without the community of our community college. So I wanted to thank you all for being here today and joining us. A couple of housekeeping items. The program is going to take about 45 to 50 minutes. I'm going to give a small intro behind me and for our panelists to speak, and then we're going to have about 30 minutes for questions from the audience. So my two colleagues are going to come around with microphones, and you can ask our panelists questions as well. And for anybody with a license in the room, please stop by the CEU table outside, like I mentioned, and for faculty members, the PGU form. And finally, we're going to have a recording of this program available hopefully by the end of the semester. And if you would like that YouTube link, please let myself or anybody in the department know that you'd like the link, and we'll send it to you. And once again, welcome to our annual program. We try to feature a different topic every year. And like I said, we wanted to focus on neurodiversity this time because we've been talking about this topic for several years now. And it's a term that has been around since maybe you've heard of the word neurotypical or neurodivergent. Those are terms that came out of the 80s and 90s, so it's not a new term. I found out that, so the University of Wisconsin in Madison and the Cleveland Clinic indicate that 10 to 30% of all college students in the United States are neurodivergent. And when you look at Moraine Valley numbers, if we have about 9,000 students that go here every year, then that would indicate about 3,000 of our students would be neurodivergent. So we have to consider ways to help understand the needs of everybody that's around us. And so given how anybody can be neurodivergent in some way, it's an important issue to address on campus, and which is why we've asked our panel of experts to educate us on the topic. And before I ask the panelists to introduce themselves, I just wanted to give you a couple of working definitions of what neurodivergence could be. So or what does it mean to be neurodivergent? One definition that I found was that it's the idea that people experience and interact with the world around them in different ways. And the idea also proposes that there isn't one right way to think or to feel or to learn or how to act, and that those differences that people have are not deficits, right? And that's a really big takeaway, because you may have heard, like in recent media, how that neurodivergent people might be their worth might be valued in different ways. But when I think about them, of course, we think about the fact that their differences are not deficits. Harvard Medical School is going to indicate that you may have heard this term in the lens of autism spectrum disorder or other neurological conditions like ADHD or learning disabilities. But ultimately, the definition that I like to settle on is another one from the Library of Medicine, is that these are different ways that people's brains process info. There's sensory info, cognitive info, motor and social info. And again, how the focus is on the positive aspects of their differences and what these people can bring to the world. And finally, it's such a large umbrella term, and it can encompass a lot of different things. And so I tried to pick like the big 11 that the University of Augustine for the health sciences indicated. And I'm just going to ask really, really briefly for like 10 seconds. If you can ask anybody next to you, which one of those surprises you to be up there? and then we'll start our program. Because there's ones that you recognize, right? But there's probably a couple that you're surprised to see. There's more than this, by the way. Somebody that I had look at this slide said they were surprised to see epilepsy. But epilepsy is a neurodivergence. Well, folks, without further ado, I am going to ask our panelists who might expound on some of these to ask them to introduce themselves, and then we will get started. And here are our panelists, and I have them in alphabetical order, but I guess we could start this way.
All right, thank you, Nick. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. John Atkinson. I've been in private practice for probably going on 30 years, and I primarily work with individuals from the ages of 6 through 18 and conduct neuropsychological evaluations to assess for different types of challenges, which include ADHD, learning disabilities, other processing disorders, etc. I also am the only one in my practice that work with adults with ADHD. So that's a little bit about me. I don't want to take too much time, but do you have any questions to add?
No, Dr. Atkinson. Okay. How long? Maybe I wasn't listening, but how long have you been in practice?
About almost going on 30 years. Yeah.
Thank you for what you do.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jason King. I teach geography and mathematics here, and you're probably saying, why is a geography teacher up here? It's because I am ND myself. I've been diagnosed with ADHD, and I believe there's some other stuff in there too. And I've been teaching classes on neurodiversity here for the last year, and it's just something that I'm really interested in. I think it can be a really helpful thing for our students, many of whom, as Nick mentioned, likely have some flavor, some expression of neurodiversity. So I'm great to see you. It's great to see you all here. Hello, everybody.
It's good to have you here, Jason.
Hi, I'm Dr. Linda Marshall. I'm an occupational therapist and private practice in Orland Park. It's neurobehavior. It's crazy to say this, but I've been practicing as an OT for 40 some plus years, and it's flew by. I also have ADHD, but back in my day, they didn't know what the heck to do with me. So there wasn't even, I think, a diagnosis criteria back then. And I think it drove me into going into neurofeedback, which I'll talk about, later. I always say this about ADHD, especially. To me, it's a gift because I wouldn't have gotten my doctorate. I wouldn't have opened a private practice. I just tell all my clients, children and adults that come, it's just a really special gift that you have to unwrap really careful. When you unwrap it and open it up, you're going to be amazed by what you have. And it can drive you into worlds that you never thought you'd ever have. So that's that.
Well, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tammy Stamus, and I am the intervention specialist at Andrew High School, which is one of our District 230 schools that feeds into Moraine Valley. I've been in education for 20 plus years. Prior to being an intervention specialist, which is just a fancy way to say that I support all students within our building, I was the school psychologist for, I want to say, 16 of those years. The reason for the shift in my job role was because I really wanted to reach all students. I saw trends going in the direction of more and more students needing support, and with limited resources, difficulty getting students identified for supports, there was a real need to make sure that we met students where they were at and not worry so much about the labels but the needs themselves. So that's why I switched to that position, which is a fairly new position for our district as a whole.
Thank you. We're so happy to have everybody here today to share all your expertise. We would like to start with Dr. Atkinson. It's, again, a pleasure to have you with us today, and thanks for taking time out of your busy day to be here. In some of the discussions that we had as we were planning this program, you shared that you have the most you have a very extensive experience with ADHD. Could you share with our audience a little bit about how this might be assessed and what you might look for?
Sure. So With any assessment, any neuropsychological assessment, the first thing that is important to obtain is a thorough background information, and I usually do that with, depending on the age of the person, either the individual themselves or the parents. So what I'm assessing and looking for is very early developmental kinds of challenges that might add to or be a part of what they may be experiencing today. Beyond that, then, a neuropsychological evaluation is a series of tabletop tasks, computer tests, and questionnaires to help me understand more of how an individual's areas of strengths and areas of weaknesses may unfold. The tasks, I often tell people, you may not understand why I'm asking you to do this. Like, you're here to assess my attention. Why are you having me put puzzles together or do drawings or things like that? It's all part of assessing different areas of thinking, reasoning, problem solving, executive functions. So we look at verbal reasoning, visual spatial processing, an area called fluid reasoning, which is a big part of novel problem solving, but also memory and new learning, academics if that's needed, as well as different executive function tests that look at how well one can organize, prioritize, etc. The in-office testing then gives me an idea through quantitative data of where an individual's functioning lies compared to others their same age, and some tests are aligned with a person's age and gender, and others are to grade level. The questionnaires then that I ask people to complete help me understand an individual's functioning more on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes the testing setting is not the best microcosm for assessing ADD, because it is one-on-one, highly structured, very little distractions, so it provides optimal conditions. But the questionnaires are vital to help me understand both the individual's self-perspective as well as someone else's perspective of how that individual is functioning more on a day-to-day basis.
Dr. Atkinson, we might have some audience members who are thinking of going into the psych field, maybe getting their PsyD like yourself or PhDs and going into your branch. Just out of curiosity, are there any names of any formal assessments? I know of the WACE. The WACE is one of the intelligence tests, but I'm not sure if the WACE is always used for ADHD. But are there any names of any of the tests that, like, maybe, like some of these guys might, during graduate school, might get trained on some of them? Maybe just a name or two.
So the WACE is still
The
very
WACE.
highly used,
Mhm.
along with the WISC. This is the Wechsler Individual Scale of Intelligence. There's one for children and there's one for adults. Beyond that, we go into many different tests. Some people use the RAML, which is the Wide Range Assessment of Memory and New Learning. The Connors Continuous Performance Test, which is a long, boring, designed to be that way test of attention on the computer. There's the Wisconsin Card Sorting Test, which is a very interesting test because it's related to problem solving, and you have to adjust your answers based on the feedback the computer gives you. Boy, list goes on. The
No, that's a
controlled
lot.
word association test.
Absolutely, and all that would go on to a report that Tammy, you might be able, like, you might be reading, or you probably received some of Dr. John's reports at the school. No, Dr. Atkinson, thank you for that. And the other question that we had kind of talked about was if you could share with our audience maybe any common misconceptions, right? Any common misconceptions that the general public might have, or that you might see about neurodivergent individuals in the clinical setting. Anything that you could share with that?
Well, with respect to ADHD, there's a lot of misconceptions, and again, this is a very long list, and I'll try to be brief. But a lot of times there is the idea that an individual feels that they are not intelligent, or they may feel dumb, and I do hear that often from children. There's a lot of frustration with their difficulties in class. They may not be able to focus. They may be distracted. May not be able to finish tests on time. So that is one myth. There is no connection between ADHD and intelligence. It's two separate areas of the brain. Another misconception is that parenting can cause ADHD.
Right.
And that's completely false. As we've been talking about, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition that's based in genetics and heredity and things of that nature. I will say, though, that parenting can help, though, depending on a parent's approach, that child with ADHD. Another misconception is that ADHD is only hyperactivity and impulsivity. There are many different spokes on that wheel of different symptoms that relate to ADHD, and oftentimes, it can go unnoticed. Um, even though it can happen in both boys and girls, there seems to be a preponderance of girls who present with ADHD symptoms a little differently. There may be more issues with inattention or distractibility or mental drifting where you're not really noticing an individual is exhibiting any problems. It's all inside, mental, internal. I had a patient years ago tell me that I could be sitting, taking a test in class, pencil in hand, and I'm looking busy, but my mind is 20 miles away. He was a musician, and a melody popped in his head, and he just started to put words to the song. And before he knows it, he's being told there's only 10 minutes left in the test. So now he's freaking out and has to hurry up and finish. So ADHD can present in those different ways. Now, ADHD is considered a chronic condition, although there are certainly ways to learn past, compensate, and even overcome, which Dr. Marshall, I'm sure, we'll get into in a little bit here. So that misconception of, gosh, I have ADHD, I'm damaged goods, is a very false belief. And in fact, like Dr. Marshall said, ADHD can, actually be an asset. So I never want an individual to leave my office feeling like they're damaged goods because they have this 4-letter thing.
Or less than, right?
Yeah, and I try to really help them understand that no, we're all made up of strengths and weaknesses. We all have our peccadillos. We all have our different ways of operating, but it doesn't mean you cannot be successful. You cannot be, contributing to society. You can't, go on and do what you want to do in life. So,
Thank you.
that's a lot.
No. Thank you. No. I mean, we have to share and have clarity on that idea. I mean, and I think our audience, who may not necessarily be trained in the field, right, and may not see clients every day, or their lenses need to be, widened in that way.
There was one more, and I'll try to be brief.
Please.
Is that kids with attention deficit often make mistakes, and they have difficulty learning from those mistakes. So oftentimes I hear that I'm always in trouble, and oftentimes that child doesn't even know why. So I hear from parents, it's like Groundhog Day at my house. Every day we have to say, put the shoes in the closet, hang your coat up, put your dish in the sink. And it's not something out of defiance. It's that child's true inability to remember and learn step by step of what they have to do from a day-to-day basis. A lot of times I talk about children with ADHD being very in the moment. So in this moment, they may be told, put your shoes away or whatever, put the dish in the sink. They do it, and then tomorrow comes. Now that whole incident is gone. Now we're on to the next moment, and it's completely forgotten. So a lot of times it can be frustrating for parents and teachers, but it's also gaining understanding, and that's why I try to help parents understand. If you can discern the ADHD behaviors from maladaptive behaviors, then your approach can be different. And that goes back to how parenting can impact and improve a child with ADHD, their functioning. So I just wanted to add that.
No, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like part of parenting is also developing empathy and understanding and patience.
Yes.
And understanding that this isn't a purposeful type of behavior.
And
that we
parent,
see
I'm a parent. I'm not perfect by any stretch, trust me. But if you can start to differentiate between this, and I'm not saying every child should be exempt from discipline, but if there are those ADHD moments when they may not be following multi-step directions in a sequence, or may be forgetful, that at that moment the child might need more guidance, support, and understanding versus admonishment. So
Thank you, Dr. Atkinson. Thank you so much.
thank you. Thank you.
And when you had shared with me a suggestion that we should contact Dr. Marshall to be on our panel, that Dr. Marshall does extensive work with biofeedback, and I shared that with my department. Really wanted to be sure that we were able to have you, which is why we started working on this 6 months prior to make sure that we can have you here. And again, we're really happy to have you with us today. And Dr. Marshall, if you could, I know you're going to share some experiences and your perspective as a board-certified occupational therapist, and I know that you have used biofeedback in your practice. For anyone in the audience that may not know what that is, can you briefly explain what biofeedback is and how can it benefit neurodivergent individuals? And I think some of the slides that we put together, hopefully it's working if you move back and forth. But whatever you'd like to say.
This is such a complex area. I'm going to do my best.
We'll get the mic in front of you too.
Sorry. This is such a complex area. I'm going to really do my best here, and I'm going to try not to talk too fast. Think of biofeedback. Bio is body, feedback to your body. It's an umbrella term. Within it is two things. There's EEG, biofeedback slash neurofeedback, same thing, and then there's surface biofeedback. Surface biofeedback is what most medical doctors are really, it's been around since the 50s. It's skin temperature. When people get anxious, right, your hands can get cold. And our heart rate, there's something called heart rate variability, differences between our respiration, heart rate, muscle tension. Those are all kind of gold standards of surface biofeedback. But with technology and computers and systems and great engineers, we do something called EEG neurofeedback, and that's looking at the brain. And the hard thing with neurofeedback, even for me breaking into it, and I started in 2008 doing this, is there's so many different approaches. And so it's so hard for people that are looking at it to figure out, who they go with or what to do. One of the biggest things is a person needs to be board certified through BCIA. So I always tell people, go to bcia.org, look up people that are board certified. At least they have committed themselves to this learning. So neurofeedback started in the 60s. I could give you a whole spiel, but I don't want to be here all day, right? But it was interesting how it started, and it just started by they'd put an electrode right here in the middle of your head. That's your sensory motor cortex. It's a real rich area of the brain, loads with sleep as well. And they would uptrain a certain bandwidth. It's called 12 to 15 hertz. Again, we could do a class on this, but it's the same bandwidth if you watch a cat, kind of having a little cream or looking out the window. They're calm, their tail's twitching. That's the EEG pattern they rewarded. Big problem though, your brain's pretty complex, isn't it? And to think that you're only going to treat one part of your brain, and maybe that's not even where the issues lie. People are still doing that. I feel like we're kind of past the 60s, and sometimes it gives neurofeedback a bad name because sometimes nothing happens. The form I worked into is called Z-score. It used to be like, here's a cap that I put in front. You guys are welcome to come up and look. It's an EEG cap. So this one's revolutionary, and I did my doctorate using it with sleep with kids with ADHD. This one's really cool because we do a quantitative EEG, which is a brain map, and we put a salt solution in there, and we record somebody's eyes open and eyes closed EEG. Am I getting too okay? and then I artifact it, take out like if they blinked, and put it against a normative database. But what's really cool about this type, which is the low resolution, it's called Loretta, low resolution electromagnetic tomography. Doesn't mean any electrics going in. Your brain's like a light bulb, and it's emitting EEG from these pyramidal neurons that are stacked in your cortex. This one is amazing because it not only looks at your EEG from 1 hertz to 40. So slow EEG, we call it big amplitude, is what people with ADHD have. It's this foggy brain that kind of feels like you're never fully awake, which I've kind of lived with my whole life, and it was reassuring to see there was a reason. And people with anxiety tend to have too much fast EEG. Anyway, it goes against a normative database, and it also gives us information about deep brain. Deep brain doesn't have pyramidal neurons to make an EEG, but we are able to holistically treat a brain like the limbic system, the brain networks, and when we do therapy, we do a full cap of 19 because we're looking at connectivity in the brain. Like I said, the brain's a super information highway. Let's see what I didn't leave out here. There's so much. So would you like me to just kind of briefly say what a session's like? Nodding?
Sure. I mean, you could use this. This is not just for ADHD, though, right? I mean, like we can use biofeedback for a bunch of neurodivergent aspects, I would imagine, right?
Right. Nobody's brain's 100% regulated. And so everybody can benefit from it. Obviously, we see people, usually we're the last person they come to because everything that they have tried hasn't worked. And while people come in, and I had shared with you the symptom checklist, people come in with symptoms, and as an occupational therapist, I honor, what's impacting your ability to function during the day and sleep, which is really an important occupation. But at the end of the day, the data from the brain map tells us where those symptoms live in the brain, in the deep brain and networks and regions and EEG frequencies, and we go with the data from the brain. So this is a very evidence-based platform, all while honoring why people are there.
I think our audience was interested too. I know it's biofeedback is used for therapy, but I guess we were wondering how biofeedback is different from more traditional therapy. Let's say for anybody that's neurodivergent, maybe you could speak to that too.
So I have this thing, I think I made it up, but I never checked to see if I made up this analogy of a house. And you have a roof, right? And you have walls and you have foundation. So OTs were really, one of our big areas is sensory processing disorder, and I saw that that was noted on one of the slides. It really is a co-occurring condition with everything. It's really not standalone. I always say to people, you can have some cracks in your foundation. Maybe you're like too many lights, too much sound. If those cracks are really big, they're going to cause a lot of hyperarousal in your nervous system, okay? That would be kind of more of a traditional approach to treating. Then there's your walls. And your walls would be, let's say you go to counseling and you work on regulation techniques, CBT, or you do mind-body meditation, nutrition, exercise. To me, those are the walls, and those are more traditional approaches. The roof is the brain. And so this is what sets us apart. We go to the brain, and we know that by going to the brain, those walls that people are putting in place are going to work better and stand taller because everything works together.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Anything else that you'd like to add?
Well,
Anything else that you think the
I
audience
have,
would want to hear?
sheets of-
'Cause I'm telling you, you're going to have audience members that are going to come to talk to you about an interest in this career.
Yeah. I will
sure.
I'll end with this. If you guys in the talk, you question answer, want me to explain kind of a session, I'd be happy to do that. But I think the big thing is anybody who comes in the door, especially ADHD, like Dr. Atkinson mentioned, you have self-esteem issues because you don't learn like other people and you think there's a problem with you. Medication, et cetera, is prescribed. Neurofeedback is about regulating your brain and improving neuroplasticity. And any changes you make, your brain made them.
And you might see that in behavior then too.
Well, and what happens is the other thing with behavior
I
is,
would imagine.
well, when you work on regulating a full brain as a system, you improve sleep. And sleep is your biggest indicator of physiological functioning of your brain. My dissertation was on sleep. All we focused was sleep on these kids. Surprise, surprise, they improved with mood regulation, attention and focus, hyperactivity, impulsivity, just by stabilizing sleep.
Amazing. Thank you very, very much. Your work is really inspiring. Tammy, hi. I'm glad that you could be here as well today. I'm glad the school, allowed you time to come. Working at a high school has got to be very exciting.
Yes,
No.
Especially this time of year. Well, your students can understand with finals.
I know. Stress is
coming around the
everywhere at the
corner.
end of the semester. Absolutely. In your current role at the school right now, and what type of supports do you think schools should have or are offering to neurodivergent students? We'll start with that, and we'll talk about accommodations. One of my colleagues was wondering about the prevalence, and I would imagine maybe the prevalence in your school, in all our schools, is the Moraine numbers too, like the worldwide numbers, 10 to 30%. So maybe you could speak to that. But what type of support do you think we should have for neurodivergent students in our schools? We'll start with that.
If it's okay, I might actually piggyback to the trends because I think the trends are going to lend
Please,
themselves
wherever
to
you want to know, wherever you
the
want.
changing landscape of education. Similar to what you had mentioned and probably what Dr. Atkinson and Dr. Marshall and even Mr. King have seen is an increase in trends across all data points. More so this year than in the past 2 decades, I would say, as a whole locally in our school district, plus at the state level, we're seeing more and more students identified with various neurodivergent needs. You could say, and the resources will say, it comes from being more aware and being more identified. But there are others who look at other factors as well. And when we're talking about sleep, we're talking about diet, environmental variables. There's so many factors at play for why these numbers have been increasing over the last 2 decades. I would say at the state level, I think the last research point showed an increase just in students that are being serviced within special education, so have an actual IEP in place. We're looking at an increase probably 12 to 15%, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you talk about the numbers, it really is a lot. When I first started education, and I was, as a school psychologist, someone who also helped facilitate IEPs, did the testing as well. In addition, I also helped oversee 504s when I first started. We maybe had a handful of students. We're double to triple those numbers. And then if you really kind of pare down to see the disability categories that those students are being identified as needing that support, it's everything and anything. Definitely, we have seen an increase. If I could say the top three we've noticed, I don't know if that's the same for the other panelists, but we've definitely seen an increase in disorders that fall on the autism spectrum. I would say probably second to that has come ADHD, and not falling too far behind right now is anxiety, especially social anxiety. And if you really look at the symptoms among all of them, they really run parallel to one another. So it really takes a lot of team members, and that includes the parents and the student, to really help dissect what the actual needs are, because it can look like any one disability at any given time. In terms of what that means for education, we have to change and adapt. There's no doubt about it. And I had already seen the numbers trending that way in just my small population set of students I was evaluating, which is why I was very excited when this new opportunity came to go into this role, and we've grown since. What do I think a school district should always aim for?
Yeah.
I think a school district really should always aim for the general student population of needs, because at the end of the day, if you look at those, everybody is a diverse learner. So our one-size-fits-all model isn't enough. So we always have professional development opportunities for our staff to always look at the classroom environment itself. What can we adjust in the classroom environment? We kind of look at it as thirds. What can work for the foundation level for most 80% of our students? At the secondary level, what can work for the next 15%? And then for those 5% who need more intense support, what does that look like? In addition to that, we're also simultaneously looking at what can we do as a building level supports. What programs can we put in place? Accommodation is one particular step, sure, but accommodation is only part of the story. It's just to level the playing field. So it's also looking at, are there programs we can put in place, like social skill pragmatic language groups for our students, not just the ones that are identified that we know of who are neurodivergent, but those students who are not identified but still need that social skill support. We look at those types of programming as well. Anxiety-based groups, again, separating and trying to give more targeted skill deficits for anxiety for those who are identified, but beyond that, also providing support for the general population for those students we miss. So I think that's the big change that you'll see. And I don't think that's just a local district. When I talk to other school districts in the area and up north, everybody is really adjusting how they can get more information to families and students faster, so that they can make better informed decisions and seek out supports they need. And I think the final piece to the support is a partnership with our local agencies, whether it's Dr. Atkinson and other agencies like Dr. Marshall's. I'm at 30 plus pages of community agencies that we've gathered over the years from parents that have gone to seek resources outside, and that we have partnered with, because it's really important to have that wraparound support. Your life doesn't start and end at school. It goes beyond the community to the job force, and we want to make sure that we're linking people up with the supports they need, not just in high school, but beyond.
Absolutely. Things have progressed since we were in school.
Much.
Yeah,
much, yes.
absolutely. And obviously for the better. And speaking of that, we have educators, well, our audience members is essentially primarily students from our college and some community members, but we have educators in the room too who are hoping to hear maybe a little bit of advice on how we can make some of our classrooms more inclusive. And I know you touched a little bit about understanding and some accommodations, but is there any more granular advice that you could give the educators, myself, and everyone here of because we don't always know who's in our classroom, and they might not always self-identify, and I want to be sure that I'm reaching all my students, and I speak for every educator in this room. We all want the best for our students. Any advice that you can give any of us for
It's-
more inclusivity?
Sure. It's going to sound very elementary what I'm about to say, but it really just comes down to connectedness and relationships. We really push that very hard. You're right, you don't know who's sitting in front of you. As staff, our coworkers, I don't know what those staff are going through as well outside of the four walls of our school building during the day. So reaching out and getting to know your student in the classroom is key. So our teachers, you will find the majority will ask students to fill out just as simple as a Google form where they'll write down information right on the first day of class about how they learn best, how do they uh, prefer to participate in the classroom. You have some that prefer just to kind of stay low and really are taking the observation in. You have others that say to the teacher, you really need to call on me every 5 minutes to make sure I'm still with you and I'm paying attention. So that one piece is so important to the rest of the semester. And then we have teachers that go beyond that initial Google form and will send weekly feedback forms and ask the student to fill those out to say, how did I do this week? What concept really came through? What concept did not that you need me to go over again? And it just allows for another piece of collaboration with the students. So that's the start of the relationship. And if it's done right, it can really break down those walls where you can have that conversation between the student and the staff member.
Awesome. Tammy, I think I could speak for everybody in the room. We're really happy to have a champion like you in our schools. No, thank you very, very, very much. Speaking of champions, I'm beyond honored to have our very own Jason King joining us today to share some of his perspectives. Jay, as somebody who's taught about neurodiversity, you've taught about this topic, you've discussed being neurodivergent. Can you share with our audience, what does that mean to you? What does being neurodivergent mean to you? We'll start with that.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you.
The more that I think about it, the more I truly think that I don't know what it means. I can tell you what it's like to be me. Take, for example, one of the most common flavors of ND existence, that's autism. Right now, we believe there are over 100 different gene expressions for that and 1,000 different de novo mutations for it. So we say that when you meet one person with it, you meet one person with it. You can't really say a whole lot about everybody in general. We don't exactly know what this relationship means. Many of these are more environmental than genetic. PTSD, for example, is one. Some maybe are mixtures of both. Maybe some are epigenetic. I'm kind of an idiot. I don't know. What I would say is that when you listen to somebody with more high support needs, they might say that they're looking for a cure. And what other people will say if they're looking more for something else, if they've got low support needs, they're looking more for something else. And what I would say is that everybody that has it has asked himself at some point, what is it like to be a problem? And that's one of those things that I feel like it's really at the core of what it can feel like. And until I realized what I was and as far as what the rest of the world was, it was kind of hurtful to feel that way. And now it just feels a little bit different. I don't know. One of the things that many people that are ND struggle with is something called executive dysfunction. That's simply having things that you need to do and you can't do them and you don't know why. It could be something like having to make a phone call or needing to, something you can tell I don't do every day is shave. could be brushing your teeth, could be something bigger than that. And so many people with flavors of ND go through these cycles of shame where they feel like they know they need to do these things. They know that they are dealing with things that other people find very easy, and with anxiety about how to get these things that need to be done. And many people with neurodiversity have other things that are, I guess, more common to everybody. One is that many people have unusual sensitivities. So either these are sensitivities that are very low, or they're sensitivities that are very high. Sensory processing sensitivity or sensory processing disorder, like Dr. Marshall said, seems to be at the backbone of what we think of as neurodiversity. But again, I'm kind of an idiot. I don't really know. Many times people deal with this sensory processing sensitivity through things that a lot of society views as being distasteful. One way is through something called stimming, which is where you might say things over and over again to yourself or out loud. You may fidget. You may need to walk around. You may do things like that. Many people with ND traits then feel like they're very different than everybody else, and not different necessarily in a good way. Many people with some flavor of ND have something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is where you feel like everybody's included at the party but you. And that can be very, very hurtful to people, especially if you're already more inclined to feel this more deeply than everybody else is. As a result, many people that are ND try not to be ND. They either say, like, I'm going to try to be like everybody else, I'm going to try harder, or they might do something called masking. Masking is not when you put a mask on like we did for many, many years, and many of us still do. I'm talking about trying to look and act normal, trying to stop stimming activities, try to talk in a way that's easier for people. Many people with autism look down. They have a hard time making eye contact, so they'll try to make eye contact with people. And to live your life that way can be very, very difficult. It can be challenging to work extra hard at looking, trying to act neurotypical when that's not who you are. I think that's all I got for that.
Jay, I thank you for all your words, but more importantly, I appreciate your courage, my friend, and I've been honored to call you a friend, and love knowing you.
It is likewise, my friend.
If it's okay that I just piggyback off of what Mr. King said, because I think that's the other piece that we can do as a community beyond even the schools and our offices better is not just the connectedness, but just talking about things. And we really try to use other students in our school to work with students who don't feel as connected. And so when we do our groups, it's all student voice and student led so they can work together. And we really do use those terms a lot because we want people to understand that what it means to have a deficit in executive functioning or a need in executive functioning or a need in sensory processing. Because again, as I said, we all have some diverse needs, but there's different levels of impact. And so the more we could talk about it, the better we are. So I appreciate Mr. King and what he had to share.
Absolutely.
I feel like so many people that are neurodiverse or the caregivers of people with it have really fragile support systems. These are people that are often overloaded. They can
Overwhelmed.
feel like, overwhelmed. Oftentimes they don't know anybody around them, so they go to people on social media. And the problem is that we are a world full of heroes. You just have to find them in places like graveyards.
Right.
What we need are heroic systems as opposed to heroic people.
Thank you.
I get double the claps. Wow. I feel really special.
Would anybody else like to add anything to, because, Jason was sharing some of the challenges that clearly he's faced and the people that he knows he's faced, but do you guys also see those difficulties with the clients and the populations that we serve? maybe a word or two about that?
Sure. It's ironic. Just yesterday, I finished an evaluation with an 8-year-old boy who presented with concerns about hand flapping, different stimming behaviors, was getting ridiculed by others for being autistic, from other children. But the parents and teachers really felt that there was an ADHD process that was impacting his functioning overall. And after doing the evaluation, again, very quantitative, objective measures, along with parent and teacher questionnaires, there wasn't a hint of ADHD with this child. And so it kind of brought me back to, okay, I kind of look at this as what am I missing, but then I had them do what's called a sensory profile. So even though I don't assess it like Dr. Marshall would, or, evaluate it in that sense, but the sensory profile had a lot of indications that this child likely has sensory processing disorder, and I referred them on to OT. Sensory processing disorder, just, I don't want to get too far off on a tangent, but probably about 25 years ago, it was pathognomonic, meaning that if you had sensory issues, you have autism, and that's not the case. Certainly there is overlap, but there are plenty of people that have sensory issues that are not on the spectrum, and certainly there are people on the spectrum that do not have sensory issues. So it's very interesting and complicated and hard to tease out. But I really think this child, like the sensory piece, he's going to benefit and have a really bright future, because he really had strong neuropsychological components across the board. His intellect, academics, his memory and new learning, his problem solving, processing speed, all was very solid. So yeah, I think the sensory piece is something that is still evolving. I don't know, Dr. Marshall, I've heard that it's no longer a diagnosis. It used to be sensory integration disorder, but that was too close to SIDS, so they had to change that. So, but it's a very interesting field, and I think a lot of people experience it and don't know it.
So from an occupational therapy standpoint, that was always our baby. Sensory processing. Yeah, it started as sensory integration out of California. The thing is, it's not considered a standalone diagnosis. We can't bill for it because it's like the floor of your house. It's foundational. You'll see it across mood disorders, OCD, anxiety. In fact, anxiety, a lot of people with generalized anxiety have heightened awareness. They, especially with smell, because odors are a strong limbic issue, and a lot of people with anxiety, either too much sound, too much overlapping, and smell. So I think, when I started as an OT so long ago, we would treat these kids from a sensory standpoint. We'd give them some foundational information to work with. A lot of ADHD kids, actually, they're maladaptive coping for their brain. Think of this brain, it's asleep. And so hyperactivity is actually a maladaptive way of waking the brain up. That's why a lot of athletes have ADHD. But what happened is now, fast forward, 40 some years of working, these kids are coming back as adults and adolescents. And so it was maybe our first visual into what was going on with anxiety, ADHD, autism, and things like that. So now Winnie Dunn, I would encourage you, if you're really interested in reading about it, she really looks at it as like you said, sometimes you have too much sensory, you're sensory seeking, and it's not so much about going in and doing a therapy session on somebody once a week and putting them in the swing and doing all that, is to support your unique sensory capabilities and to understand that they are unique. So it wouldn't matter what your diagnosis is, just to understand that everybody has sensory issues, but some of their cracks on the floor are bigger.
And Dr. Marshall, while some of those behaviors may seem atypical to some populations, the behaviors that Jason's talking about, or Dr. Atkinson, or yourself, Tammy, a lot of these are self-soothing behaviors, right? To help calm some of the anxiety, to help calm down some of the internal struggles that we're having.
And so that's why I was referring to Winnie Dunn, because she presents, once you do a more in-depth analysis, she'll present like, these are support strategies, which are regulating that you can engage in if you have, certain characteristics of sensory processing disorder.
Folks, our program is not over, but I would like to take a moment and give a hand to our panelists at this point. And we'll thank them again later, too. if we can, I'd like to spend the rest of the time answering questions from the audience. So for the Q&A portion, my two colleagues, Mitch Baker and Dr. Amy Williamson, are going to come around with a microphone. Raise your hand. Think about what you want to ask the panel. Raise your hand. We'll try to get to all your questions, and that's going to take us into the last pieces of our program. So think about what you'd like to ask. And Professor Baker's here. Dr. Amy Williamson is here. You can have it could be a general question. It could be a question
We have one
from
over
our
here.
panelists. We have one,
Moraine?
Mitch? Julia.
Hi.
Hey.
So my question was actually for Dr. Marshall. I wanted to ask about how sleep has an effect on neurodivergencies such as ADHD and your knowledge related to that.
So as I said, because sleep's an occupation and occupational therapy, when I did my doctorate, I worked with kids with ADHD that were on trazodone and they had to be weaned off. And, sleep research is really complex. I feel like I know this much, but they have definitely shown kids with ADHD and also kids on the spectrum, they have sleep architecture that's broken up. They have something called periodic limb movements, and so they'll move a lot during the day or during the night. And what that does is interrupts those sleep stages you go through. You need good slow wave sleep and REM sleep to be restorative for daytime functioning as far as working memory. Really important for that. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly, but sleep is really the foundational piece here. And when you improve sleep, and then there's always the behavioral part with sleep too, and that's a separate entity. But from a neuro standpoint, they don't really know why we sleep because all sleep research is done on fruit flies. Because if you did sleep research on humans, you could hurt them badly. But they think that there's a theory called the glymphatic removal system, that when you sleep, your brain is ridding itself of toxins. And so that's a really important piece to just physiological health. That's why when you're sick, you need to sleep. When you have surgery, you need to sleep. It's restorative. But from a brain-based standpoint, ND people tend to have sleep architecture problems. And those periodic limb movements that I mentioned, especially kids with ADHD, have a transporter. It's called ferritin, serum ferritin, and it's low, and it transports iron. And that causes those movements during the night. So if you can deal with the diet part and work with the doctor to improve iron supplements that are prescribed, you'll reduce those movements during the night. Sleep will be consolidated, and you'll have better focus and attention during the day. And one other thing too, ADHD, they tend to have some circadian rhythm disorder. So their bodies don't fall asleep when other people typically get tired. So they may be really late to fall asleep, late to wake up, and so that's their unique sleep architecture.
Can I piggyback off that? One of the
Please.
fun things about ADHD, maybe if you know somebody with it, is being up at 2 a.m. because you just have to learn every single thing on Wikipedia, and that can be super fun. It's never happened to me, of course.
Jay, you're talking about most of my nights.
One thing I just want to say, what you prompted me was, I always tell people too, ADHD and high functioning ASD, I always say we're like really good friends. Maybe we're even cousins because we share so many common characteristics. And but at the end of the day, like I said in the beginning, to me, it's a gift. If I didn't have this, even though I went through horrible things growing up, I mean, even I'll mention in 6th grade, my mouth was taped shut back then, and they only removed it for lunch, the masking tape. So you can imagine how I felt growing up. There was something wrong with me, right? But it's still to me a gift, and I wouldn't want to be any different.
Well, that's how a lot of us probably felt growing up, right? Many of us that were on some type of spectrum of ND. And I've always wondered if grade school kids are young enough to be able to appreciate this type of awareness. Certainly as adults we're learning about this, but whatever capacity young kids can have empathy, I wonder, Tammy, if at any point, this type of awareness, I haven't been in school in so long, grammar school and high school, but I wonder if this is a type of awareness and programming that we have in schools. You're saying that we do.
I
hope we do.
I think it's important, but I think people that grow up like this actually end up having more empathy.
We do.
Right? Because you know what it's like to be different. And I think, sharing it with other kids and growing up and not looking at it as it's a negative, maybe that could help.
Right. But I wonder if the neurotypical community, let's say in our grammar schools, would benefit if they could even appreciate these differences.
Mr. King mentioned the word heroes, and they are there. And growing the support network is huge. Do you grow it at our age? We're probably past that. Not that we don't stop there, but where do we grow it? With our younger generation. So that's why we work really hard at our school to provide opportunities with students, but not in one-on-one sessions in an office and with an adult, but in group sessions, small, medium, large, and with students that have come from very different backgrounds, different learning styles. Whether you consider them to be typical or atypical, that doesn't matter as much as do they have a strength in this skill. So if they have a strength in this skill, then we want them to showcase it and help other students who maybe need support in that skill. So whether it is our groups for social pragmatic language, where we have peer helpers assigned, whether it's in our sports world where we have unified Special Olympics to support students, we definitely are growing supports in that area, and that's the best thing we think we could do to build that support network.
Good to know. Thank you. We have another question back here. Matthew?
Hi. So for a little minor bit of context, I have autism, except it's not autism, it's Asperger's syndrome. I don't know, I want to make that distinction. And something that's happened recently is for our, like the last papers of the semester, I've really leaned into that. I wrote a sociology paper about Star Wars, and I wrote a personality paper about Elden Ring.
Nice.
And I got a perfect score on both. And I got feedback afterwards, and I read it, and I immediately went, like, looked at the papers, and I'm like, this is the most autistic thing I've ever written in my entire life. And I laughed to myself about it, but it kind of makes me think about that double edge of, like, it really is like a blessing and a curse. But I really tend to see it as more of a curse. So I'm wondering if the question is, like, if you guys have any advice about kind of pulling yourself out of that rut, as in, like, oh, you can see yourself, like, starting to, like, almost like perpetuate stereotypes, or if you just see that it's kind of becoming like you lean more into that instead of, like, oh, there's, like, people say there's a difference between, like, I'm an autistic person and I'm a person with autism, like that little bit of a distinction. So if you guys have any advice for pulling yourself out of that rut if you get into it.
I'd like to say briefly, I'm not breaking any FERPA laws, but it was a really good paper. So how do you pull yourself out of that, right? How do you pull yourself out of that rut?
I think what you just started to say was the key. It's a mind shift, right? We work really hard to try to work with students about that. You have to celebrate those moments. You should celebrate it. You should frame it. You should remind yourself of that moment because it says so much about you as a person. And the moment we start to shift our thought into those negative self-talk is where we kind of lose the battle. And the battle is really within ourselves. Like we work with so many students over the course of their 4 years in high school, and we tell them all, you will definitely have moments to celebrate. You just have to hang in there. And we had one student that wrote an email to a speech pathologist saying it took 7 years, but I think I finally made a friend. I tried everything you told me, and this is how it worked for me. And I can't celebrate it enough. But in that same message, he wrote, but this probably isn't a big deal. So right within those first few seconds of celebrating, he took that moment away from himself. So it's the mind shift. You have to stay in that moment and celebrate that moment. And the next time a negative thought comes, you remind yourself. You take a picture and you have it as a screensaver on your phone, and you remind yourself of that moment, because there are many more moments to come like that. But it is hard work. It's hard as adults to have that mind shift. And it's harder when you don't have the right support system around you. So beyond just focusing on yourself and changing those negative thoughts and stopping yourself as soon as you hear yourself speak like that or think like that, surround yourself with people who will also bring you up and support you.
we can be our harshest critics. We can be.
Right.
But we do have to give ourselves those affirmations, right? Because we're worthy individuals, right? And and there's a lot of things that we've been accomplishing.
One thing I'll just add with that too is uh, the reason we do neurofeedback is just to improve resiliency in the brain. So, triggers maybe that would come up that would provoke us and make us feel horrible about ourselves or, not be able to do things that we want to do. It's like if you had a car, you would get an oil change, you'd work on the car, you want to make sure the car works. The same thing with the brain. It doesn't mean that it's a problem, so to speak, but it just gets that brain in a more regulated, resilient state so that you can use those walls where you can say to yourself, you can do affirmations, you can use CBT, you can reframe things. And so for me, that's why I have gone to this field of neuro because it's an empowering thing where there's neuroplasticity. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't stop at 21 anymore. Thank God. You can make changes in your brain that'll improve your sleep and your ability to cope.
Jay, you want to add anything to that?
What I would say is that sometimes anything that I try works, sometimes nothing I try works. Um, and being ashamed of being ashamed, like if I can take a look at myself, try to pull myself out of my own head, which is really hard to do because this is all I've got, right? It's just this physical body. Then I can kind of have a laugh about it and say, like, you realize what you're doing, right? You know why you're doing it. You're doing it because you you are feeling ashamed of being ashamed. And you've dealt with this before. You'll probably deal with it again. And just trying to be as gentle with yourself as you're willing to be with everybody else.
That's great advice.
And that's really, really hard to do.
Thank you.
But I have no universal ideas. If I did, I would I would use them on myself.
We do our best, right? We do
We
our
do.
best to get through our day and to do what we need to do. Thank you. Amy, we have a question in the back. Mitch, you have another question over here. And then this young lady has a question too. All the way in the back.
So I was gonna ask how nicotine and caffeine affect ADHD because I know I use caffeine to help me focus,
Yes.
but some people experience it differently.
So there was this time when me and my cousin went out to eat. This was when I was much younger than I am today. And I ordered a Mountain Dew, drank it, ordered another one, drank it, ordered another one, drank it. I think I was up to 7. They were bigger than this thing.
7?
7.
Did you sleep throughout the
And-
month?
Well, the thing is that she was looking at me like, how are you not dead? And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is what everyone does. Caffeine for many people with ADHD calms them down. And one of my problems more recently is now that I'm 47, is I can't use caffeine as much as I used to because now I start to drink a little bit more and my heart starts to go, and that's not exactly a comforting feeling. So, yeah, my understanding is that stimulants in many ND people work the opposite way they're supposed to.
And if I could add to that,
That's
the
interesting.
research I've looked at, it's been ADHD has been around since the 1920s. It was first thought of to be a brain injury of all things because the people that had specific brain injuries, particularly to the frontal lobe and prefrontal cortex, would have problems with impulsivity, poor focus, disorganization, etc. As time has gone on, likely in the 80s and 90s when there was more higher level imaging like PET scans and SPECT scans that could really analyze the brain and determine that while ADHD does have neurotransmitter roots, it's also neurodevelopmental in the sense that that area of the brain, the frontal lobe and prefrontal cortex, is not getting enough energy from the other areas of the brain. Because they first thought, when you give a child that's hyperactive a stimulant and they calm down, it's some magical paradoxical effect. But it's the stimulation that the frontal lobes are not receiving that helps to contribute to those ADHD symptoms. So now, when you give a stimulation to the brain like that, now you're better able to focus, you're better able to be inhibited. The way it was always put to us in grad school is and I'm not making a commercial here for medication, but we'll just stick to the stimulant question you have. If you have a car battery that's low, and it's not dead, but it's low, and you turn the lights on, they shine dim. If you put the jumper cables on, which is synonymous with stimulation, now the lights shine bright again. So it's a matter of getting enough energy to the frontal lobes to help those functions work more effectively.
Mitch?
I have a question. I have a younger sibling that deals with ADHD and OCD. So I'm wondering, is there he does have tendencies in different ways. So is there a proper way to help him manage like what he is um, like feeling? Or is do we have to target more like one more than the other to help him excel in school because he is like medicated and everything. He goes to like therapy and stuff. But is there a better or more beneficial way to help him? Yeah.
I think she's saying what can the family do to support the efforts to bring about the best
That's what it
outcomes.
sounded like.
It sounds like you're by the little bit you just shared, there's already a lot in place in terms of support. I think the best advice I could give just from my perspective is for any of you or somebody you know is always kind of look at it in multiple domains. So what do they need in school? May not look the same as what they need for behavior regulation in and out of school. Also may not look the same as what do they need for their own personal emotional well-being. So when I meet with students, I'm always looking at those three and triangulating them as much as possible, and just meeting them where they're at and taking them step by step. I'm not, the expectations are here, but we're not going to get here if we don't go step by step. So I think, like I said, it sounds like you've got some pieces at play, but maybe sitting down as a family, because again, building that support network that Mr. King suggested is key. What impacts one person in that small community of a home or a friend group or coworkers impacts everybody. So you want to be able to meet to talk about what works and what doesn't, and in what areas, and then just kind of go from there. That's from my perspective.
That's really insightful advice.
I think. You wanna say something?
Oh, Dr. Atkinson, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that all of these diagnoses and what was on the board before, they are not one size fits all. So it's a matter of getting to know your own or your family members' particular set of challenges, and then tailor those challenges and approaches accordingly. Um, I don't want to step on your brother's therapist's toes, but it would be, I think, another avenue is to consult with his therapist to say, what can we do at home? We're doing things in the office. A lot of times when I did do therapy, everything sounded great, looked great. Between parent and child, we're all on the same page, and as soon as the door opens, a lot of times all bets are off, right? So it's a matter of and so when parents ask me questions about their particular child that I've assessed, that I've seen these particular issues, I can tailor, suggestions to them. So if it hasn't been done already, maybe talk to your brother's therapist to say, what can we do at home given his particular type of ADHD and OCD to make things better for him and for us.
Right, to have better continuity, right, between
Yes.
the two environments. Thank you, Dr. Atkinson. Jay?
One thing that is sometimes true about ND traits, stimming, echolalia, which is where you repeat phrases over and over again when you do things that are really repetitive, is for many ND people, these are signs of stress.
Mm-hmm.
So people do these when they're feeling stressed. I remember we were talking about the student that a song would go in their head and then, well, tests are stressful, right? We do these things when we're more stressed out. Additionally, and this is not speaking so much to your condition as to just ones in general, because ND traits are genetic, sometimes people that are ND have ND people around them and they're trying to help themselves, and at the same time somebody's doing something that's the exact opposite of that. My own kids, for example, I have one that's a sensory seeker and I have one that's a sensory avoider. So one, when he is feeling stressed out, he wants to wrestle, he wants to make lots of loud noises, and that's not super good for my sensory avoiding kid. So sometimes trying to make sure that you yourself are doing okay is really important in this process as well, I think.
Thank you for that advice as well, and thank you for your question. We have about 5 minutes left. I think we have time perhaps for one more question. please.
Hi. So, for some context, my entire life I kind of felt like there was something wrong with me. Autism and ADHD runs in it's like in both sides of my family, and I've been told by psychiatrists, therapists, and stuff that I'm showing lots of signs of both ADHD and autism. But it seems like every time I kind of like try to get treatment for it or get like diagnosed with it, it seems like they're kind of going off of stereotypes. Like I've been told like straight up, oh, there's no way you could have autism. You're too smart. I got told you can't have like, oh yeah, you're showing a lot of signs of ADHD, but it's nothing to call home about. It's fine. But then also that entire time I kept being told like, hey, look at me, pay attention, stay on task. And then when I was in occupational therapy for what's the word? You were talking about it earlier where executive functioning.
Executive dysfunction, yeah.
Yeah, executive dysfunction. I'd kind of get told all the time, like, everybody else can get this done faster than you. You know that, right? We have an issue. But then, like, again, when I try to get diagnosed for things, they kind of go off of stereotypes. And it's kind of making me feel like hopeless about trying to properly like get a diagnosis for anything. And I was kind of wondering if anyone has any advice for how I should go forward with that, like how to kind of find a good place to go to, and like, because like again, like multiple like professionals have been telling me that I'm showing signs. My family's saying I'm showing signs, but then I go there and they're kind of like dismissive.
Like, where should you start, right?
So I'm sorry, you've been assessed by professionals? I had a little bit of hard time hearing you.
Do you need the microphone? Here, let's get you the microphone one more time, so we can hear you.
Yeah, I have, but they've been like pretty dismissive about it and kind of like saying, oh yeah, you're showing signs, but it's this. There's no way it could be ADHD or autism. It's just a sensory processing disorder. It's just your
Just a sensory
anxiety.
process.
So
that's
where
a big
can we
one.
find a more thorough assessment, if you will?
Yeah. And the assessment part of you've probably been through a lot already, but it sounds like I don't know if all bases were covered, like maybe parts but not all, and it left you kind of feeling very confused because you have this sense and self-awareness about what you're experiencing, but yet others are saying kind of the opposite, or that it's. I feel like they're minimizing it. Is that correct? Or diverting it someplace else. So I mean, it might be unfortunately going back to the drawing board to finding someone that can assess and help determine. And then once those concerns are identified, then there could be a better direction to help get the assistance and support that you need. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but or if you're asking where can I go to get the supports now. I'm not sure.
Or better support. Dr. Marshall, you were going to share something.
Well, first of all, I'm really sorry about the occupational therapist experience there. And again, from my standpoint, sensory processing is a foundational thing that's there. And we support our individual sensory needs. A lot of people come to us with a lot of the same things that you're feeling because you don't fit into that diagnostic criteria, with ADHD or high functioning autism or whatnot. For me, and I'm not pushing this, but for me, that's the quantitative EEG. It takes your brain data and tells us what's going on in your brain. And it's very definitive. And a lot of people that come just find it very validating because it answers questions that they've been having for so long and nobody can really give them those answers. And then, they at least have some data in front of them to, help validate their feelings and then maybe guide them in the direction that they need to go.
I'm not sure if most people are aware of this, but the state of Illinois did launch a new portal I believe in January of this year, called Beacon, Beacon. It is a partnership with the Illinois Department of Human Services. I agree with Dr. Atkinson. Sometimes you have to keep going, you can't give up, and you have to look for other agencies that you can go to. So if you use that portal, it is free for anyone that lives in the state of Illinois. You put your zip code in. You don't even have to create an account if you don't want to. You can just go in there and put your zip code in, and then just pull up different types of professionals that you are looking to seek out in your area. If you're interested in creating an account, then they assign you a case manager and you can work with a case manager, but it's something that maybe you can look into as well.
Tammy, thank you. Thank you, everybody. This is going to conclude our program. We can't thank our panelists enough for joining us. That will conclude our program. On behalf of our department, on behalf of the Liberal Arts Department, Dr. Anderson, we'd like to offer these as thank yous to you for coming. Yep, absolutely. A token of our appreciation and thank you.